Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The following content is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or psychological advice. Divorce is a complex process with significant legal and emotional implications that vary by jurisdiction and individual circumstances. The historical trends, case studies, and anthropological data discussed here are intended to provide a broad perspective on a sociological phenomenon and should not be used as a substitute for professional counsel. We strongly advise all viewers to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified attorneys, licensed therapists, or financial advisors regarding their specific situations. The American man is currently living through an unprecedented anthropological shift that has quietly dismantled the social architecture of the last 10,000 years. We often hear the statistic that roughly half of all marriages in the United States end in dissolution, but we rarely discuss what that looks like through the lens of human evolution and tribal survival. For the modern male in the USA, divorce is not merely a legal filing or the end of a romantic partnership. It is a form of social and biological excommunication that many are fundamentally unprepared to navigate. We are witnessing the breakdown of the primary unit of human organization, and the fallout is creating a new class of men who are drifting without the traditional anchors of identity, purpose, and community. In this deep dive masterclass, we are going to peel back the layers of the American divorce industrial complex to understand how we got here, why the male experience of separation is uniquely destabilizing, and what the historical data tells us about the future of the American family. This video is designed to solve the mystery of why men often feel like they are losing more than just a spouse during a divorce. We will examine the transition from marriage as a survival contract to marriage as an emotional fulfillment vehicle, and how this shift has left many men standing on a foundation that was never designed to hold the weight of modern expectations. To understand the anthropology of divorce for men today, we must first look at the biological and historical script that governed male behavior for millennia. Anthropologically speaking, the human male was designed to function within a tight-knit hierarchy where his value was tied to protection, provision, and the continuity of his lineage. In this ancient context, divorce was rare because the survival of the offspring, and by extension the tribe, depended on the stability of the pair bond. Marriage was a functional alliance between families, often serving as a tool for resource management and political stability. However, the American landscape underwent a radical transformation starting in the mid-20th century. The 1969 signing of the Family Law Act in California, which introduced the concept of no-fault divorce, served as a legislative earthquake. Before this, divorce required a demonstration of fault, such as adultery or abandonment. The shift to no fault essentially transformed marriage from a binding covenant into a civil contract that could be dissolved by either party for any reason. For men, this change was more than just a legal pivot, it was a total reconfiguration of the male identity. In the decades prior, a man's status in the community was largely anchored to his role as the head of household. When that household is dissolved, the man often undergoes what anthropologists call social death. Unlike women, who historically maintain stronger non-familial social networks and kinship ties, many American men consolidate their entire emotional and social lives into the nuclear family unit. When the marriage ends, the man doesn't just lose a partner. He loses his primary social conduit, his domestic stability, and often his sense of place in the broader community. Historical trends indicate that divorced men in the U.S. experience a significant friendship recession. Case studies show that while women may see an increase in social support post-divorce, men frequently report a sudden and sharp decline in their social circle, often finding that the friends they shared as a couple remain with the wife or drift away entirely. We must also analyze the economic anthropology of this transition. For much of American history, the male role was defined by the breadwinner trap. This was a social contract that promised a man status and authority in exchange for his lifelong labor and the provision of resources to his family. As women entered the workforce in record numbers and achieved greater economic independence, the functional necessity of the male provider began to erode. From an anthropological perspective, this is a massive shift. If a man's primary value was his ability to provide resources, and those resources are now being generated independently or can be sought from the state or other sources, the male finds himself in a crisis of utility. This crisis is often exacerbated during divorce proceedings. In the U.S. legal system, historical trends show that men have frequently been viewed primarily as financial engines rather than emotional caregivers. This can lead to a sense of identity liquidation. where the man is expected to continue providing the resources of the marriage while being stripped of the daily presence and authority that made that provision feel meaningful. The data regarding the psychological and physical impact of this transition is stark. Anthropological studies on stress and social isolation reveal that divorced men have significantly higher rates of mortality, cardiovascular disease, and mental health struggles compared to their married or single counterparts. This is often linked to the loss of the regulatory function that a spouse provides. In many traditional male-female dynamics in the U.S., the woman acts as the primary health manager for the household. When that structure vanishes, men often fall into poor nutritional habits, increased substance use, and a neglect of preventative health care. This isn't just a matter of not knowing how to cook. It's a biological response to the loss of a pair bond that served as a grounding force for the male's nervous system. Furthermore, we need to address the fatherhood fragment. Anthropologically, the role of the father was to integrate the child into the tribe and provide a template for navigation within the social hierarchy. In the modern American divorce, the father often becomes a visitor in the lives of his children. The shift from a 24/7 presence to a weekend dad schedule creates a profound sense of grief that is rarely acknowledged in mainstream discourse. This is a deep dive into the loss of purpose. If a man's biological drive is to protect and guide his offspring, and he is legally restricted in his ability to do so, the resulting cognitive dissonance can lead to a state of chronic, learned helplessness. We see this reflected in the potential outcomes of long-term custody battles, where the high-stakes environment of the courtroom forces men to defend their fitness as a parent, a process that is inherently adversarial and dehumanizing. As we move forward in this series, we will examine how the modern digital landscape and the rise of atomized living have made this anthropological transition even more difficult. In the past, a divorced man might have found solace in a local lodge, a church, or a tight-knit neighborhood. Today, those institutions have largely withered. The American man now navigates the wreckage of a marriage in an environment of extreme individualism, where his struggles are often met with the advice to simply grind harder or get back out there. But you cannot grind your way out of a fundamental loss of human connection and tribal belonging. This part 1 has laid the foundation for understanding that divorce is not a personal failure, but a predictable outcome of a massive cultural shift that has left the male operating system running on outdated code. We are going to look at the specific steps men are taking to rebuild their tribes from scratch, and how the definition of masculinity is being forced to evolve in the face of this new reality. We will explore the second shift for men, the necessity of developing emotional intelligence and domestic self-sufficiency that was never part of the traditional male upbringing. The problem we are solving today is the lack of a roadmap. By understanding the anthropological why behind the pain and confusion of divorce, we can begin to chart a path that moves beyond mere survival and toward a new, more resilient form of male identity in the 21st century. To understand the trajectory of the modern American man, we must examine the architectural collapse of what sociologists call the institutional marriage. Imagine if you were a man living in the year 1950. Your marriage was a social and economic fortress. It was governed by clear, rigid roles that provided a sense of predictable stability. In this era, the anthropology of the male was simple. You were the outer wall of the fortress. Your job was to face the world, secure resources, and bring them back to the inner sanctum. In exchange, the institution provided you with a permanent social standing, legacy, and a domestic manager. This was a partnership of necessity. However, as we look at the data leading into 2026, we see that the fortress has been replaced by a mirror. Marriage in the United States has transitioned into what is known as the individualized marriage. In this model, the goal is no longer communal survival or lineage continuity, but personal self-actualization and emotional fulfillment. For the American man, this shift is catastrophic because while the expectations of his role have evolved, his biological and social support systems have remained rooted in the old world. Let us look at a case study involving a man named David, a 44-year-old software architect living in a major U.S. hub in 2026. David followed the modern script to the letter. He worked high-stress hours to afford a mortgage in a top-tier school district. He participated in domestic duties and was an involved parent. When his marriage dissolved, David didn't just lose a partner. He experienced a total systemic failure. In the anthropology of the modern U.S. divorce, David represents the friendship recession. Historical trends show that men in the United States often outsource their entire social life to their wives. The wife is typically the one who schedules the dinner parties, maintains the holiday card list, and keeps the ties with other couples. When the divorce papers are served, the man often finds that his social calendar is not just empty, it is non-existent. David realized that every friend he thought he had was actually a friend of the marriage, not a friend of the man. Within 6 months of his separation, David's only consistent human interaction was with his co-workers and the barista at his local coffee shop. This is not an isolated incident. It is a documented anthropological trend where the male becomes a social nomad, drifting without the anchoring influence of the domestic unit. This social isolation is compounded by what researchers call the ambiguous loss of the male identity. In the 2026 landscape, the American man is often told that his traditional provider role is obsolete, yet he is still largely judged by his ability to generate capital. When a divorce occurs, the legal system often treats the man as a balance sheet. Consider the potential outcomes of asset division in a high cost of living area like Northern Virginia or the Silicon Valley. The man may find himself in a situation where he is paying for the upkeep of a home he no longer lives in, while residing in a one-bedroom apartment that feels like a temporary staging ground rather than a home. Anthropologically, the home is the territory. For the human male, the loss of territory is linked to a significant spike in cortisol and a decline in testosterone. He is a hunter without a camp. This lack of territory leads to a phenomenon we call the hovering man. This is a man who exists in a state of permanent transition, never fully unpacking his boxes because he doesn't know where he belongs in the social hierarchy anymore. We must also dive into the step-by-step breakdown of the communicative death of the American marriage. In many case studies, we see a pattern called the demand-withdraw cycle. In the lead-up to a 2026 divorce, the female partner often expresses a need for more emotional intimacy or self-actualization. The male partner, operating on the old anthropological code of provision equals love, responds by working harder or fixing physical problems in the house. This creates a massive disconnect. The man thinks he is being a good husband by ensuring the 529 college savings accounts are funded. The woman feels emotionally abandoned because the marriage is no longer serving her personal growth. By the time the divorce is initiated, the man is often blindsided because, in his mind, he was fulfilling the contract. He was providing. This blindsiding effect is why men in the USA are statistically more likely to experience a sudden and severe decline in mental health post-divorce. They are not just grieving a relationship, they are grieving a reality they thought they understood. Furthermore, let's look at the digital footprint of divorce in 2026. We live in an era of hypervisibility. For a man like David, every scroll through social media is a reminder of the tribe he no longer belongs to. He sees photos of other families at backyard barbecues, and the algorithm designed for engagement often feeds him content that reinforces his isolation. Historical trends in the 20th century allowed for a certain level of private rebuilding. Today, the divorce is a public performance. The man has to navigate the optics of his failure in real time. This leads many men to retreat into digital silos, online communities that can sometimes offer support, but often just amplify the sense of grievance. This is a crucial turning point in the anthropology of the American male. Without a physical tribe, he seeks a digital one, and the quality of that digital tribe often determines whether he successfully transitions into a new version of himself or becomes stuck in a loop of resentment. Step by step, the man must then navigate the economic reality of the split. In 2026, the cost of maintaining two households on what was previously one combined income is a Herculean task. Imagine if your overhead suddenly doubled while your support system vanished. This is where we see the concept of the financial shaming of the divorced man. Even if he is meeting all his legal obligations, the drop in his standard of living is often perceived by society as a drop in his value. In American culture, a man's worth is frequently tied to his zip code and the car he drives. When he is forced to downsize, he experiences a loss of status that is physically painful. This isn't vanity. It is a primal reaction to falling down the tribal hierarchy. Case studies from the year 2025 and 2026 suggest that men who survive this transition effectively are those who engage in what we call identity diversification. They stop putting all their eggs in the basket of the nuclear family and begin to build a rugged, independent sense of self. But this is easier said than done when the legal system is breathing down your neck and your children are only with you 4 days a month. This brings us to the most volatile aspect of this deep dive: the transformation of the father into the visitor. When a man's biological purpose of protection and guidance is reduced to a court-ordered schedule, his brain undergoes a radical shift. He begins to see the world not as a place of opportunity, but as a place of high-stakes litigation. This creates a hypervigilance that is exhausting. He is constantly documented, constantly judged, and constantly at risk of losing the little access he has left. This stress doesn't just stay in the courtroom. It follows him into his work, his health, and his future relationships. It is a weight that the modern American man was never trained to carry, and the social institutions that used to help him carry it have all but disappeared. But what happens when the legal battle moves from the bank accounts to the hearts and minds of the next generation? What happens when the man realizes that the very laws designed to protect the family are, in his view, the tools being used to dismantle his connection to it? In the next part, we are going to expose the hidden mechanics of the American family court system as it stands in 2026. We will look at the rise of the silver bullet strategy in custody disputes, and how the anthropology of the father is being rewritten in the halls of justice. You will see why the most dangerous place for a modern man isn't the streets, but the Mahogany Road courtrooms where his future as a parent is decided in minutes. The loop is just beginning to close. The Mahogany Road courtrooms of 2026 are not designed for resolution. They are designed for the orderly distribution of assets and the management of parental access, according to a standardized bureaucratic grid. For the American man, stepping into this environment is often his first encounter with the raw power of the state over his private life. Imagine if you are Mark, a high school teacher in Columbus, Ohio. You have spent 15 years building a life, a home, and a relationship with your 2 children. In the span of a 20-minute temporary orders hearing, the physical and emotional architecture of that life can be dismantled. Mark sits at a table while attorneys speak a language of statutes and billable increments that seem to have nothing to do with the bedtime stories he read or the scraped knees he bandaged. In this moment, Mark is no longer a father in the anthropological sense. He is a litigant. He is a data point in a system that, according to historical trends, still leans heavily toward the primary caregiver model, a model that often defaults to the mother regardless of the modern reality of dual-income households. The core of the anthropological crisis here is the best interests of the child standard. On paper, it sounds noble and protective. In practice, as seen in thousands of case studies across the United States, it is a highly subjective and ambiguous tool that allows for immense judicial discretion. This ambiguity is where the adversarial nature of the U.S. legal system becomes a psychological meat grinder for men. Because the standard is not clearly defined, the only way to win or even secure equal time is often to prove that the other parent is losing. This forces a man like Mark into a position where he must either witness his life's partner being disparaged or participate in the disparagement himself, just to maintain a relationship with his offspring. This is what anthropologists call the ritual of betrayal. It breaks the remaining bonds of respect and replaces them with a permanent state of high-stakes conflict that can last for the remaining minority of the children's lives. We must look at the mechanics of the silver bullet strategy, a term often used in family law circles to describe high-conflict tactics used to gain immediate tactical advantage in custody disputes. In 2026, the speed at which a man can be removed from his residence and restricted from his children based on an ex parte motion, a motion filed without his presence, is a staggering reality. For the American male, whose identity is often tied to being the protector of the home, being legally barred from that home without a full hearing is a form of cognitive whiplash that few are prepared for. The potential outcomes of these early legal volleys often set the tone for the next 2 years of litigation. If a temporary schedule is set that gives the father every other weekend, that schedule frequently becomes the status quo, and the status quo is the most difficult thing to change in a family court. Anthropologically, this transition from a full-time resident to a part-time visitor creates a profound sense of disenfranchised grief. It is a loss that society does not recognize as a death, yet for the man, it feels as though a part of his lineage has been surgically removed. Let us analyze the economic anthropology of the 2026 divorce through the lens of child support and alimony, now often called spousal maintenance. In many states, these calculations are driven by rigid spreadsheets. While intended to ensure the standard of living for the children remains stable, they often fail to account for the reality that the man must also fund a second household that is functional enough to host children. Mark, our teacher in Ohio, finds that after his mortgage payment for the marital home, his child support obligations, and his own rent for a small apartment, he has less than 30% of his take-home pay to live on. He is now living in what sociologists call the provider paradox. He is working harder than ever to provide for a family he no longer lives with, while his own standard of living has dropped below what he experienced in his early 20s. This is not just a financial burden, It is a spiritual one. When a man's labor is decoupled from the daily rewards of family life, the incentive structure of his existence begins to erode. Furthermore, the legal system in the United States often operates on a model of conflict as a commodity. In 2026, the average contested divorce can cost between $20,000 and $100,000 per side. For a middle-class man, this is the liquidation of his entire life savings. This is the burning of the tribal granary. Every dollar spent on a motion for contempt or a custody evaluation is a dollar taken away from the children's future. Yet the system is structured in a way that makes these expenditures feel mandatory for survival. Case studies show that the financial depletion of the father often leads to a secondary collapse, the loss of his career momentum, the stress of constant litigation, the need for midday court appearances, and the psychological weight of the conflict result in a documented decline in professional performance. The man is being squeezed from both ends. His costs are rising while his ability to earn is being compromised by the very system demanding the payments. We also need to consider the role of the expert in these proceedings. In 2026, custody evaluators and guardians ad litem hold immense power. These individuals spend a few hours with a family and then write reports that can dictate the next decade of a man's life. Anthropologically, this is the outsourcing of tribal wisdom to a secular bureaucracy. The father's historical knowledge of his children, his unique bond, and his role in their development are filtered through the lens of a stranger's clinical observations. This creates a sense of profound powerlessness. If the evaluator does not understand the man's communication style or misinterprets his stoicism for lack of affection, the potential outcomes can be devastating. Men in the US are socialized to be the strong, silent type, but in a 2026 courtroom, silence is often interpreted as absence, and strength is often interpreted as aggression. This leads to the phenomenon of the paper father. This is a man who exists perfectly on the legal documents. He pays his support, he shows up for his scheduled time, he follows the decree to the letter, but the spirit of his fatherhood has been extinguished by the constant threat of legal sanction. He lives in fear that a single missed phone call or a late drop-off will be used as evidence in a future motion. This hypervigilance changes the way he interacts with his children. He becomes a Disney dad or a permissive parent because he is afraid that setting boundaries will make the children not want to come to his house, which could then be used against him in court. The natural authority of the father is replaced by a desperate need for the children's approval as a form of legal insurance. But the most chilling aspect of this deep dive isn't just the loss of money or time. It is the biological toll that the adversarial process takes on the male body. As we move into the next phase of this masterclass, we have to look at what happens to a man's heart, his brain, and his very DNA when he is kept in a state of fight or flight for years on end. What happens when the stress of the courtroom translates into a physical breakdown that the system is not equipped to handle? You are about to see how the legal battle for the family often ends in a medical battle for the man himself. We are going to look at the data that links high-conflict divorce to the silent killers of the American male, and why the most dangerous thing Mark might face isn't his ex-wife's attorney, but his own rising blood pressure and the isolation of a silent home. The transition from the courtroom to the clinic is a path too many men walk alone, and we are going to break down exactly why that happens. The biological toll of this anthropological shift is not just a metaphor. It is a measurable systemic degradation of the male organism. When a man moves from the courtroom to the clinic, he is often suffering from what researchers call high allostatic load. This is the cumulative wear and tear on the body and brain that results from being chronically overexposed to neural or neuroendocrine responses to stress. In the year 2026, we have more data than ever before showing that the male body reacts to the dissolution of the family unit as if it is under a sustained physical assault. Imagine if you are James, a 48-year-old logistics manager in Atlanta. James spent 2 decades in a state of relative homeostasis, provided by the predictable rhythms of family life. Now, in the midst of a contentious 2026 divorce, James's smartwatch is constantly alerting him to a resting heart rate that has climbed 20 beats per minute higher than his historical average. This is not just anxiety. This is the body's sympathetic nervous system stuck in a permanent state of fight or flight because the tribe, the territory, and the purpose have all been compromised simultaneously. To understand the anthropology of the dying divorced man, we must look at the role of cortisol. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, and in short bursts it is life-saving. But for the American man in a multi-year legal battle, cortisol becomes a slow-acting poison. Historical trends show that divorced men have significantly higher morning cortisol levels compared to their married peers. This chronic elevation leads to a cascade of potential outcomes: suppressed immune function, increased abdominal fat deposition, and the breakdown of muscle tissue. James finds that despite eating the same way he always has, he is gaining weight around his midsection, what some call the divorce gut. Anthropologically, this is the body's attempt to store energy for a long, lean winter of social isolation. But in 2026, it manifests as a precursor to metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. Furthermore, we must examine the crisis of sleep and the failure of the glymphatic system. Human beings are social sleepers. For thousands of years, the pair bond provided a sense of safety that allowed for deep restorative REM sleep. When James lies in his silent, half-empty apartment, his brain is unable to fully power down. He is experiencing what sleep psychologists call the first night effect every single night. Because he feels vulnerable and unanchored, his brain stays in a state of hypervigilance, scanning for threats in the silence. The glymphatic system, which acts as the brain's waste removal service, only functions efficiently during deep sleep. Without it, James begins to experience cognitive fog, irritability, and a decline in executive function. Step by step, this sleep deprivation erodes his ability to perform at work and make rational decisions in his legal case, creating a feedback loop of failure. This biological degradation is exacerbated by the loss of the domestic health manager. In the United States, historical trends indicate that women are the primary drivers of healthcare utilization within the family. They are the ones who notice the suspicious mole, insist on the colonoscopy, and manage the household's nutritional intake. When James is separated from this influence, his health often takes a backseat to the immediate demands of his legal and financial survival. Case studies from 2025 and 2026 suggest that divorced men are 60% less likely to visit a primary care physician than married men. James ignores the nagging chest pain and the persistent fatigue because he is focused on his billable hours and his visitation schedule. By the time he finally seeks medical attention, what could have been a manageable issue has often evolved into a life-threatening condition. This is why we see a sharp spike in cardiovascular events among men in the first 3 years following a divorce. The heart, quite literally, breaks under the strain of both the emotional loss and the absence of a health maintenance structure. We also have to discuss the phenomenon of telomere shortening. Telomeres are the protective caps on the ends of our DNA strands, and their length is a primary marker of biological age. A 2026 deep dive into the cellular health of high-conflict litigants revealed that prolonged exposure to the adversarial legal system can accelerate cellular aging by up to a decade. James may be 48 on his birth certificate, but at a cellular level, his body is functioning like that of a 60-year-old. This is the hidden cost of the paperwork in the depositions. Every motion for contempt and every hostile email from opposing counsel triggers a microinflammatory response that chips away at the man's biological reserve. Anthropologically, we are seeing the creation of a ghost generation. Men who are physically present but biologically depleted, their vitality sacrificed to a system that views their health as an irrelevant variable. The neurological impact is equally profound. Chronic stress causes the amygdala, the brain's fear center, to enlarge and become hyperreactive, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic and self-regulation, begins to shrink. This is why a man who was previously known for his level-headedness may suddenly find himself prone to outbursts of rage or bouts of paralyzing despair. He is not losing his mind. His brain is physically restructuring itself in response to a perceived existential threat. In the 2026 landscape, this is often misdiagnosed as simple depression, but it is more accurately described as a form of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The man is a soldier who has returned from a war where the enemy was his former life, and the battlefield was his own living room. As we look deeper, we see the emergence of the inflammation trap. Modern medicine is beginning to link systemic inflammation to almost every chronic disease, from Alzheimer's to cancer. Social isolation is one of the most potent triggers of inflammation known to man. When James spends his weekends alone, staring at a screen or scrolling through the digital artifacts of his lost family, his body produces inflammatory cytokines at a rate comparable to a physical injury. He is in a state of perpetual internal swelling. Case studies show that this inflammaging process is why divorced men have a higher risk of developing autoimmune disorders. The body, lacking its social and tribal anchors, begins to turn on itself. But what happens when this biological breakdown meets the social vacuum of the modern world? What happens when a man like James, already physically and neurologically compromised, realizes that the society he worked so hard to build has no place for him anymore? In the next part, we are going to explore the invisible man syndrome. We will look at how the American man becomes a ghost in his own community, and how the loss of social status leads to a final, devastating withdrawal from the world. You will see how the 2026 digital landscape is creating a new kind of social exile for divorced men, and why the pull of the dark corners of the internet is becoming an irresistible siren song for those who have been stripped of their identity. The body has broken. Now we watch the social fabric unravel. The unraveling of the social fabric is perhaps the most invisible yet devastating phase of this anthropological journey. When a man moves from being a core component of a family unit to a single entity, he enters a state of social atomization that the modern United States is uniquely ill-equipped to handle. Imagine if you are Michael, a 52-year-old project manager living in a quiet suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina, in the year 2026. For 25 years, Michael's social identity was anchored to a specific neighborhood, a specific set of coupled friends, and a specific role in the community. When his marriage dissolved, he didn't just lose a wife. He lost his membership in the only tribe he had ever known. In the anthropology of the American suburb, social circles are almost entirely constructed around coupled pairs. We call this the couple's ghetto. When one pair in the group dissolves, the remaining couples often experience a subconscious threat response. Historical trends suggest that the divorced man is often viewed as a social contagion. The other husbands see him as a reminder of their own potential vulnerability, while the other wives may see him as a disruptive element to the established social order. Step by step, Michael begins to notice the invitations to backyard barbecues and holiday parties drying up. He hasn't done anything wrong, but his presence no longer fits the symmetry of the group. This is the birth of the invisible man syndrome. In 2026, social capital is the true currency of the American middle class, and for most men, that capital is managed and maintained by their spouses. Case studies show that women generally invest more time in maintaining the social ties that bind families together. When Michael is removed from that management, his social network collapses with startling speed. He finds himself in a world where he is no longer invited to the events where decisions are made and community bonds are forged. This social exile leads to a profound sense of disenfranchised grief. Society recognizes the loss of a spouse, but it rarely recognizes the loss of an entire community. Michael is still living in the same city, perhaps even the same neighborhood, but he has become a ghost. People wave from their driveways, but the conversations are shorter, the eyes are averted, and the deeper connection is severed. This vacuum of belonging is what creates the opening for the digital siren song. When a man is hungry for connection and identity, but finds the physical world cold and exclusionary, he turns to the only place that offers an immediate sense of tribe: the internet. In 2026, the algorithms that govern our digital lives are more sophisticated than ever. They are designed to identify emotional vulnerability and provide a targeted solution. For a man like Michael, who is feeling stripped of his status and his purpose, the algorithm begins to feed him content that validates his anger and provides a new, albeit distorted, anthropological framework for his life. He moves from scrolling for news to falling down rabbit holes of grievance-based communities. These digital silos offer a potent mix of camaraderie and radicalization. They provide a step-by-step guide on how to interpret his divorce not as a personal tragedy, but as a symptom of a larger war on men. Historically, men found meaning in local lodges, veterans groups, or trade unions. But in the atomized landscape of 2026, these physical institutions have been replaced by digital avatars and echo chambers. The potential outcomes of this shift are significant. Instead of a local mentor who might help him navigate his grief with wisdom and perspective, Michael finds thousands of anonymous voices who encourage him to lean into his resentment. This is what we call algorithmic radicalization. The man is looking for a way to make sense of his pain, and these communities provide a ready-made enemy to blame. The danger here is that the digital tribe does not require him to grow. It only requires him to remain angry. It replaces the complex, messy work of rebuilding a real life with the easy dopamine-fueled high of online combat. Furthermore, we must analyze the loss of ritual in the life of the divorced American man. Anthropology tells us that human beings need rituals to navigate transitions. We have rituals for birth, for marriage, and for death. But in the US, there is no ritual for the death of a marriage that honors the man's struggle. He is simply expected to move on. Imagine if there was a ceremony that acknowledged Michael's transition from a father in the home to a father in the world, one that provided him with a new set of responsibilities and a new sense of honor. Instead, he is met with a legal decree and a bill for child support. This lack of ritual leaves him in a state of liminality, a threshold where he is no longer who he was, but has no idea who he is becoming. Case studies from 2025 and 2026 suggest that men who do not find or create their own rituals of transition are more likely to remain stuck in the anger phase of grief for decades. This status loss also impacts the professional sphere in ways that are rarely discussed. In many corporate environments in the USA, the image of the stable family man is still a prerequisite for high-level leadership roles. When Michael's marriage collapses, his professional stock can take a hit. Colleagues may perceive him as less stable or less reliable, even if his performance remains high. This is the subtle anthropology of the workplace. The married man is seen as anchored and invested in the future, while the divorced man is seen as a flight risk or a distraction. The potential outcomes for Michael's career include being overlooked for promotions or excluded from the informal networks where the real power lies. He is experiencing a multidimensional liquidation of his social and professional identity. But perhaps the most insidious part of the social fabric unraveling is the way it affects the man's relationship with time. In a family, time is structured by the needs of others, school schedules, sports practices, anniversary dinners. For the divorced man, time suddenly becomes an empty, echoing chamber. He has hours of silence that he doesn't know how to fill. This is when the biological and neurological damage we discussed earlier truly takes root. Without the regulatory rhythm of the family, his internal clock begins to drift. He stays up later, sleeps in longer, and loses the sense of urgency that previously drove his life. He is drifting in a sea of unstructured time, and without a tribe to pull him back to the shore, he can easily disappear into the depths of chronic isolation. As we look at the data, we see that the American man in 2026 is at a crossroads. He can either follow the digital siren song into a world of permanent resentment, or he can begin the grueling work of constructing a new kind of masculinity that doesn't depend on the traditional nuclear family for its validity. But this path is fraught with obstacles. How does a man rebuild his social capital from scratch at 50? How does he find a new tribe when the old one has turned its back? And most importantly, what happens when he tries to re-enter the mating market as a man who has been through the meat grinder of the American divorce system? In the next part, we are going to dive into the brutal reality of the 2026 dating landscape for divorced men. We will look at the rise of the beta burnout and why the modern search for a second chance often feels like a descent into another kind of madness. The market is waiting, but the rules have changed, and the cost of entry is higher than most men can afford to pay. You are about to see why the second marriage is often the most dangerous game a man will ever play. The re-entry into the American mating market in the year 2026 is often the moment where the divorced man realizes his previous social software is not just outdated, but completely incompatible with the current hardware of human connection. Imagine if you are Robert, a 46-year-old civil engineer in Denver. Robert last dated in the early 2000s, a time when a man's value was communicated through face-to-face interactions, social reputation within a physical community, and a steady career trajectory. When he opens a dating application in 2026, he is stepping into a hyper-efficient, algorithmically driven commodity market that treats his life story as a series of data points. For the divorced man, these data points often include a diminished net worth, a complex custody schedule, and the psychological fatigue of a failed 20-year investment. Anthropologically, Robert is no longer a young buck in the prime of his reproductive value. He is what sociologists call a legacy asset with high maintenance costs. The first shock Robert encounters is the phenomenon of beta burnout. This is a specific psychological state observed in American men who spent decades fulfilling the provider role, only to find that in the 2026 dating market, that role is viewed with skepticism or seen as a baseline requirement rather than a competitive advantage. Robert is exhausted. He has spent years in the high-stress environment of marriage and the even higher stress environment of divorce. He is looking for peace, but the market demands performance. Historical trends indicate that while men in their 20s are judged on their potential, men in their 40s and 50s are judged on their current utility and emotional baggage. Case studies show that divorced men often attempt to use the same strategies that worked for them in the 1990s or 2000s, offering stability, loyalty, and financial security, only to realize that the modern landscape prioritizes high stimulation traits and a lack of domestic complexity. we must look at the step-by-step breakdown of the app-based economy of attention. In 2026, the average time a person spends looking at a profile before deciding to swipe is less than 2 seconds. For a man like Robert, who has a lifetime of experience and wisdom to offer, being reduced to a single poorly lit photograph taken in his new, sparsely furnished apartment is a form of social humiliation. This is the anthropology of the pixelated self. He is no longer Robert the father, Robert the engineer, or Robert the neighbor. He is a thumbnail in an endless scroll. The potential outcomes of this environment are a rapid decline in self-esteem and a sense of profound alienation. He realizes that the traits he developed to be a good husband, patience, compromise, and long-term planning, are invisible in a market that rewards immediate charisma and aesthetic perfection. Furthermore, we need to analyze the rebound trap. Anthropological data suggests that men are statistically more likely than women to seek a replacement partner quickly after a divorce. This is often not driven by a search for love, but by a desperate need to restore the domestic regulation and social status they lost. Robert feels like a ship without an anchor. He seeks a new partner to fill the silence of his home and to validate his worth as a man. However, case studies from 2025 and 2026 show that these early post-divorce relationships have a failure rate of over 75%. This is because the man is often in a state of emotional shock and lacks the clarity to select a compatible partner. He is not choosing a person. He is choosing a bandage for his wounded identity. When the bandage inevitably falls off, he is left with a second failure that often feels more devastating than the first. This leads us to the most dangerous phase of the anthropological journey, the decision to enter a second marriage. In the United States, the statistics for second and third marriages are significantly grimmer than for first marriages. While roughly 40 to 50% of first marriages end in divorce, that number jumps to 67% for second marriages and over 70% for third marriages. For Robert, the stakes are existential. A second divorce in 2026 could mean the total liquidation of his remaining retirement funds and a permanent estrangement from his children. Why then do men continue to take this risk? Anthropologically, it is the pull of the tribe. The human male is not designed to live in an atomized, single-serving world. He is driven to build a home and a legacy. But in 2026, the legal and social environment for a second marriage is a minefield of conflicting interests. Consider the anthropology of the blended family. This is a scenario where the man's biological offspring from his first marriage must compete for resources and attention with a new partner and, potentially, that partner's children. Imagine the friction in a Denver household in 2026 where Robert is trying to balance his alimony payments, his child support for his biological children, and the daily expenses of a new household. Historical trends show that the primary point of failure in second marriages is not a lack of love, but the resource war between the old family and the new one. The man is caught in the middle, serving as a biological and financial bridge between two warring tribes. This creates a state of chronic stress that can lead to the physical breakdowns we discussed in previous parts of this masterclass. We must also address the rise of the transactional mindset. Because the 2026 dating market is so heavily influenced by digital platforms, many divorced men begin to view relationships through a purely transactional lens. They start to see women not as partners, but as service providers or competitors for status. This is where the digital siren song we mentioned earlier becomes most potent. Robert, frustrated by his lack of success on apps and the high cost of dating, may find himself consuming content that teaches him to view women with suspicion. This is a catastrophic anthropological shift. It moves the man from a state of seeking connection to a state of defensive posturing. He becomes a negotiator in his own love life, constantly calculating the return on investment for every date and every emotional disclosure. The step-by-step erosion of trust is the final product of this market. When Robert has been ghosted by 10 women in a row or has spent thousands of dollars on dates that lead nowhere, his brain begins to recalibrate. He starts to build a wall around his heart and his bank account. He becomes the beta burnout in his purest form, a man who still has much to give, but has decided that the cost of giving is too high. He retreats into a quiet, cynical existence, or worse, he doubles down on a second marriage that he knows deep down is a mismatch, simply because he cannot bear the thought of being alone in the silent world of 2026. But what happens when this cycle of failed re-entry and transactional dating leads to a total withdrawal from the social contract? What happens when a man like Robert decides that the game is rigged and the only way to win is to stop playing? In the next part, we are going to explore the quiet quitting of the American male. We will look at the rise of the ghost man phenomenon, men who are opting out of marriage, fatherhood, and traditional career paths entirely. You will see how the 2026 landscape is creating a new class of men who are physically present but socially and economically offline. The fallout of this mass withdrawal is about to hit the American economy and the American family like a tidal wave, and we are going to break down exactly how it starts. The social contract is being torn up, and you need to see what is being written in its place. The quiet quitting of the American male is not a loud protest staged in the streets. It is a silent, microscopic evaporation of ambition that is currently reshaping the economic landscape of the United States in 2026. To understand the anthropology of the ghost man, we have to look at the intersection of a man's psychological incentive structure and the legal reality of the American family court system. For decades, the engine of the American middle class was the married man's desire to build a legacy, provide a superior standard of living for his children, and secure a place of honor within his community. When that engine is dismantled through a high-conflict divorce, the man often undergoes a radical recalibration of his worth. He stops asking how he can achieve more and starts asking what is the absolute minimum he can do to survive without being further exploited by a system he perceives as predatory. Imagine if you are Kevin, a 38-year-old former regional sales manager in Austin, Texas. In 2023, Kevin was the definition of a high performer. He worked 60-hour weeks, chased every bonus, and poured his identity into a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. After a grueling divorce in 2025, the 2026 version of Kevin is unrecognizable to his former colleagues. He has moved into a 400-square-foot studio apartment. He has no furniture other than a bed and a high-end laptop. He drives a 10-year-old sedan that is fully paid off. Most importantly, Kevin recently turned down a promotion that would have increased his salary by $30,000. Why? Because according to the historical trends of his specific legal jurisdiction, nearly 60% of that increase would be absorbed by recalculated support payments and increased legal fees to fight the inevitable modification motion. In Kevin's mind, he is being asked to work 30 additional hours a week for a net gain of pennies. This is the promotion paradox. When the marginal utility of a man's extra labor drops towards zero, he doesn't just work less. He fundamentally detaches from the concept of career advancement. This detachment is creating what economists in 2026 are calling the productivity gap. For the first time in American history, we are seeing a significant cohort of college-educated, high-skilled men opting out of the traditional corporate ladder. They are moving into the gig economy, taking remote consulting roles, or pursuing solo entrepreneurship, not to get rich, but to become invisible to the state's financial tracking systems. This is the anthropology of the survivalist. Kevin isn't buying a new house. He isn't buying a new boat. He isn't contributing to the consumerist cycle that sustains the American economy. He has embraced a forced minimalism that acts as a psychological armor. If he owns nothing, nothing can be taken from him. If he has no public-facing success, he is no longer a target for litigation. Step by step, this withdrawal affects the social fabric of the community. In the anthropology of the American suburb, men like Kevin were the invisible scaffolding. They were the ones coaching Little League, volunteering for the neighborhood watch, and maintaining the local infrastructure through their tax dollars and physical labor. When Kevin becomes a ghost man, he retreats from these roles entirely. He no longer feels a sense of ownership over a community that he feels has branded him a visitor in his own children's lives. Case studies from 2026 suggest that the decline in male volunteerism is directly correlated with the rise in no-fault divorce rates in specific zip codes. The man feels like a mercenary in his own life. He works for the paycheck, pays his obligations, and then disappears into the digital ether. Furthermore, we must examine the rise of the shadow father. This is a man who, after years of being ground down by the adversarial nature of family court, decides to stop fighting for the 50-50 custody split. This is not because he doesn't love his children, but because the cost of the fight, psychologically, financially, and physically, is threatening to end his life. He chooses a peripheral role because it is the only way he can maintain any semblance of mental stability. This is a tragic anthropological shift. We are seeing a generation of men who are physically present but emotionally and legally sidelined, creating a fatherhood vacuum that will have profound potential outcomes for the next generation of American children. The shadow father provides the check, but he stops providing the guidance, the boundaries, and the tribal identity that only a father can offer. We also see this reflected in the 2026 dating gap. Women in their 30s and 40s are finding a marketplace filled with ghost men. Men who are technically eligible but emotionally and financially unavailable. These men have no interest in marriage, no interest in cohabitation, and no interest in merging their lives with another person. They have been through the meat grinder and have emerged with a deep-seated distrust of the legal and social contracts of the United States. This is what we call the commitment strike. It is not an organized movement. It is a collective, individual response to a perceived lack of safety. When a man realizes that the most important contract of his life can be dissolved at any time for any reason, with significant financial and parental penalties, he simply stops signing contracts. Case studies in 2026 are beginning to show the impact of this on the housing market as well. The traditional American dream of the white picket fence is being replaced by the rise of the bachelor pod. Real estate developers are shifting focus toward high-density, low-maintenance living spaces designed for single men who prioritize security and digital connectivity over domestic space. This is the physical manifestation of the ghost man phenomenon. The home is no longer a place of family and legacy. It is a base of operations for a solitary existence. The man is building a life that is portable, scalable, and, most importantly, defensible. The psychological shift from hero to hermit is perhaps the most profound part of this masterclass. For thousands of years, the male psyche was oriented toward the heroic sacrifice for the tribe. In 2026, the American man is being told that his sacrifice is either unnecessary or toxic. When he is then stripped of his role in the family, the heroic archetype collapses. In its place rises the hermit, a man who focuses entirely on self-preservation, solitary fitness, and niche hobbies that require no social validation. He finds more meaning in his digital achievements or his solo mountain biking trips than he does in his professional or familial roles. He has opted out of the social contract because he feels the contract was broken by the other side first. But what happens when this local opting out turns into a global search? What happens when men like Kevin realize that the rules that apply in Austin, Texas, do not apply in other parts of the world? As we look at the data for 2026, we are seeing a massive spike in American men seeking connections, lifestyles, and legal protections outside of the U.S. borders. This is not just about travel, it is about the geopolitics of love and the rise of the passport bro movement as a survival strategy. In the next part, we are going to look at the international migration of the divorced American male. We will explore why thousands of men are taking their remote jobs and their remaining assets to cultures that still offer a traditional social contract. You will see how the American divorce system is inadvertently fueling a brain drain and a capital flight that the U.S. government is completely unprepared to handle. The ghost man is about to become a global citizen, and the implications for the American future are staggering. The borders are opening, and the men are leaving. This global migration is not merely a trend of digital nomadism. It is a calculated geopolitical survival strategy that we are seeing manifest with surgical precision in 2026. For the divorced American man, the borders of the United States have begun to feel like the walls of a financial and emotional enclosure. When the domestic social contract is perceived as fundamentally broken, the human male, like any migratory species, begins to look for more favorable environments. This is what anthropologists are now calling regulatory arbitrage. It is the process by which a man like Brian, a 45-year-old aerospace engineer from Seattle, decides to move his entire existence to the coast of Portugal or the highlands of Southeast Asia. Brian is not looking for a vacation. He is looking for a jurisdiction that respects his agency, protects his remaining capital, and offers a cultural framework where his role as a provider and protector is still recognized as a primary social good. Imagine if you are Brian in 2026. In Seattle after your divorce, you are living in a studio apartment that costs $3,000 a month. Your take-home pay is decimated by alimony and child support payments that were calculated at the peak of your career earnings. In the US, you are a demographic ghost, a man who is ignored by the dating market and viewed by the state as a high-yield tax asset. However, when Brian takes his remote engineering job and relocates to a secondary city in Eastern Europe or Central America, the anthropology of his existence changes overnight. His US dollars, even with 2026 inflation, possess a purchasing power that allows him to live in a high-security villa for a fraction of his Seattle rent. But the economic arbitrage is only the surface level. The real shift is in the social hierarchy. In his new environment, Brian is no longer a legacy asset with high maintenance costs. He is a high-value entrant into a new tribe. Historical trends show that the passport bro movement, which began as a niche internet subculture, has evolved into a mass migration of professional class men. In 2026, we are witnessing the institutionalization of this movement. There are now specialized legal firms and relocation consultants who provide a step-by-step guide for the divorced man to transition his life abroad, while remaining in compliance with his U.S. legal obligations. This is the search for the traditional contract. Anthropologically, these men are seeking cultures that have not yet undergone the radical individualization of the American family. They are looking for societies where the family is still the primary unit of organization, and where the male role is anchored to clear, stable expectations. Case studies of men who have made this transition suggest a significant improvement in markers of biological health, including lower cortisol levels and improved cardiovascular function. They are no longer in the fight-or-flight environment of the American family court system. They are in a state of social integration. We must analyze the economic fallout of this brain drain. In 2026, the United States is facing a silent crisis as thousands of high-skilled, high-earning men like Brian exit the domestic economy. When these men leave, they take their consumption, their investment, and their technical expertise with them. They are paying their U.S. support obligations from abroad, but they are not spending their remaining wealth in American shops, they are not paying local property taxes, and they are not contributing to the growth of American communities. This is a form of capital flight that is entirely driven by the perceived hostility of the domestic social landscape. The potential outcomes for the U.S. economy are staggering. As the ghost man becomes a global citizen, the tax base that supports the very social systems that marginalized him begins to erode. Furthermore, let us look at the step-by-step process of the cultural recalibration that occurs when a man leaves the U.S. In the American dating market of 2026, Brian was competing in a hyper-efficient digital commodity market, where he was judged on a 2-second swipe. In a more traditional culture, the anthropology of his courtship changes. He is judged on his reputation, his stability, and his ability to integrate into a family structure. This provides a sense of psychological safety that the American man has been starved of for years. He finds that he is no longer a negotiator in his own love life, but a participant in a communal ritual. This is the appeal of the international search. It offers a return to a recognizable anthropological script. However, this migration is not without its own high-stakes risks. In 2026, we are seeing the rise of the expat trap. Just as the man is seeking a new tribe, he can often find himself targeted by individuals and systems in his new home that view him purely as a financial resource. Case studies show that without a deep understanding of the local culture and legal landscape, the divorced man can find himself in a second, even more complex version of the situation he fled. He may find that the traditional contract he sought is only a facade, or that the legal protections he assumed existed are non-existent in a foreign jurisdiction. This is the danger of the nomadic life. You are a permanent outsider. While you may have high status due to your wealth, you lack the deep kinship ties that provide true security in a crisis. The anthropology of the 2026 global man also includes the phenomenon of the remote fatherhood paradox. Men like Brian are using video technology and international travel to maintain relationships with their children back in the U.S. While this allows for a level of connection that was impossible in previous decades, it also creates a sense of profound fragmentation. The man is living a high-quality, high-status life in one part of the world, while his biological legacy is growing up in a completely different cultural and economic reality. This tension between the man's personal well-being and his parental duties is the final frontier of the divorced male experience. He has solved the problem of his own survival, but he has done so by creating a geographical and cultural rift in his lineage. As we move toward the conclusion of this deep dive, we must address the most uncomfortable question of all. Is the exodus of the American man a temporary correction, or is it the beginning of a permanent divergence? In 2026, the data suggests that the men who leave rarely return. They build new lives, new families, and new identities that are entirely decoupled from the American dream. They have found a way to win a game that they felt was rigged against them, but the price of that victory is the abandonment of their homeland. But what happens to the men who stay? What happens to the millions of men who do not have the resources, the remote jobs, or the inclination to leave the United States? They are left to navigate a landscape that is becoming increasingly polarized and unstable. In the next part, we are going to explore the rise of the new masculinity movements within the U.S. We will look at how men are attempting to rebuild their tribes on American soil, through the creation of male-only spaces, the revival of fraternal organizations, and the emergence of the Stoic survivalist. You will see how the 2026 man is attempting to engineer his own social safety net in a country that has forgotten how to provide one. The ghost man is coming back online, but he is doing it on his own terms. The internal migration is about to begin. The internal migration is not a movement across physical borders, but a movement across the psychological and social landscape of the American male. For the men who choose to stay in the United States in 2026, the environment is no longer seen as a home to be maintained, but as a terrain to be navigated with tactical precision. We are witnessing the birth of the reconstruction phase. This is where the man who has been through the meat grinder stops looking at what he lost and starts looking at what he can build with the remaining pieces. Consider Chris, a 42-year-old structural engineer in Phoenix, Arizona. In 2024, Chris lost his home, his daily access to his children, and 60% of his net worth. By 2026, Chris has become a central node in what anthropologists call a microtribe. He has stopped trying to reintegrate into the traditional coupled society that rejected him. Instead, he has engineered a parallel social safety net that operates entirely outside the conventional American family structure. To understand the anthropology of this reconstruction, we must look at the fraternal renaissance of 2026. For decades, male-only spaces in the United States were in a state of terminal decline. The local lodges and fraternal orders of the 20th century were largely seen as relics of a bygone era. However, the systemic destabilization caused by high-conflict divorce has created a massive, unmet demand for male-specific kinship. Chris doesn't belong to a traditional lodge. He belongs to a decentralized, high-trust network of divorced men who have formed what is essentially a modern version of a mutual aid society. They utilize secure digital platforms to organize physical meetups that range from intense fitness camps to deep-dive legal strategy sessions. These are not venting sessions. They are resource-sharing hubs. Step by step, Chris and his peers are rebuilding the tribal infrastructure that the modern world deleted. They share information on historical trends in local family courts. They recommend vetted therapists who understand the male experience of disenfranchised grief, and they provide the manual labor for each other's relocation and domestic setup. Imagine if you are Chris standing in your new, smaller living room in Phoenix. In the old model, you would be alone, facing the crushing silence we discussed in previous parts. In the 2026 microtribe model, your Saturday is not spent in isolation. Instead, other men from your network arrive to help you install security systems, mount furniture, and optimize your home office. This is the anthropology of shared burden. Historically, men have always functioned best when they have a clear objective and a group of peers to help achieve it. By decoupling their social value from the nuclear family, these men are rediscovering the power of the fraternal bond. Case studies from 2026 indicate that men in these networks show significantly lower rates of chronic inflammation and higher scores on resilience metrics compared to those who attempt to navigate the post-divorce landscape alone. This leads us to the rise of the Stoic survivalist archetype. In the anthropology of the American male, we have moved from the hero, who sacrifices for the family, to the ghost, who disappears, and now to the sovereign. The sovereign man in 2026 is defined by a radical commitment to self-regulation and physical mastery. Chris has replaced the domestic routine of the marriage with a rigorous, almost monastic discipline. He spends 2 hours a day in high-intensity physical training, not for vanity, but as a form of biological insurance. He understands that his body is his only remaining asset. Historical trends in male group formation show that during times of social upheaval, men often turn to physical culture as a way to reclaim a sense of agency. The gym in 2026 has become the new cathedral for the divorced man. It is a space where the rules are objective, the progress is measurable, and the hierarchy is based on merit rather than legal status. Furthermore, we must analyze the emergence of the bachelor manor. In high-cost cities like Phoenix, Austin, and San Diego, the 2026 data shows a sharp increase in divorced men pooling their resources to rent or buy large multi-bedroom properties. This is a strategic response to the economic liquidation of divorce. Instead of 3 men living in 3 separate low-quality apartments, they combine their remaining capital to live in a high-quality, defensible environment. Anthropologically, this is a return to the longhouse or the communal barracks. It provides a built-in social circle, shared domestic labor, and a significant reduction in the cost of living. This allows Chris to meet his financial obligations to his former family, while still maintaining a standard of living that prevents the status loss depression we explored in Part 5. These households often have strict rules regarding conduct, cleanliness, and the exclusion of high-conflict external influences, creating a sanctuary of stability in a volatile world. The legal dimension of this reconstruction is equally strategic. We are seeing the rise of the pro se collective. These are groups of men who have realized that the billable hour model of the U.S. legal system is designed for their exhaustion. Chris and his tribe share legal research, templates for motions, and strategies for navigating 2026 custody evaluations. They are becoming their own paralegals. By removing the profit motive from their legal defense, they are able to sustain long-term engagement in the court system that would previously have been financially impossible. This is a form of collective bargaining for parental rights. They are utilizing the very technology that atomized them to reconnect and level the playing field against the multi-billion-dollar divorce industrial complex. The potential outcomes of this internal migration are profound for the future of the United States. We are seeing a divergence in the male population. On one side, you have the men who remain in the cycle of resentment and depletion. On the other, you have the new tribesmen like Chris, who are developing a form of masculinity that is resilient to the dissolution of the nuclear family. This new model is built on the pillars of strategic minimalism, fraternal loyalty, and biological mastery. They are no longer seeking the approval of a society they feel has betrayed them. They are seeking the respect of their peers. This is the birth of a parallel social order. But as these men become more self-sufficient and more detached from the traditional social contract, a new question emerges. What happens to the American community when its most productive and resilient men no longer feel a stake in its primary institutions? When Chris finds his purpose in his tribe rather than his town, and his legacy in his fraternal bonds rather than his property, the very foundation of the American middle class begins to shift. We are reaching the tipping point where the individual man is no longer a fragment of a broken family, but a cell in a new, more durable organism. The loop is almost closed. We have tracked the American man through the initial shock of divorce, the biological breakdown, the social exile, and the global exodus. Now we see the rise of the new domestic tribes. But there is one final critical piece of this deep dive. What is the ultimate synthesis of this journey? In our final part, we are going to look at the 2030 projection for the American family and the final evolution of the male identity. We will explore the emergence of the neo-patriarch, and why the system that tried to dismantle the father may have inadvertently created a version of him that it can no longer control. The transformation is nearly complete, and the final revelation will change the way you look at the future of the West forever. Keep watching for the conclusion of the Deep Dive Masterclass. The synthesis of the sovereign male's journey culminates in the emergence of what sociologists in 2026 are beginning to call the neo-patriarch. This is the final stage of the anthropological evolution we have tracked throughout this masterclass. The system that was designed to atomize the man, liquidate his assets, and marginalize his parental influence has inadvertently produced a class of men who are more resilient, more focused, and more strategically detached than any generation in modern American history. Imagine if you are Thomas, a 55-year-old former corporate vice president in Seattle. Thomas did not just survive his divorce in 2024. He used it as the catalyst for a total systemic reboot. By 2026, Thomas has moved past the stages of grief, the biological breakdown, and the social exile. He has entered the phase of legacy construction. In this final part of our deep dive, we will examine how men like Thomas are redefining the concept of the family and the state, and why the potential outcomes of this shift are creating a parallel society that will define the year 2030 and beyond. The core of the neo-patriarchal model is the decoupling of fatherhood from the domestic union. In the old anthropology of the United States, a father's role was intrinsically tied to his status as a husband. When the marriage ended, the fatherhood was often legally and socially diminished. The neo-patriarch, however, views fatherhood as an ideological and biological mission that exists independently of a marriage contract. Thomas has spent the last 2 years building what he calls the shadow household. He does not live with his children full-time, but when they are with him, the environment is not one of entertainment or passive visiting. It is an intensive mentorship program. Historical trends show that men in this stage shift from being Disney dads to being master educators. They utilize their remaining resources to provide their children with private tutors, specialized athletic training, and a rigorous philosophical grounding that the public school system in 2026 often lacks. Case studies suggest that children raised under this mentorship model develop a high degree of resilience and a deep-seated loyalty to the father's tribe, rather than the state-sanctioned family unit. We must also look at the financial fortress of the neo-patriarch. Thomas has learned the hard lessons of the 2024 asset liquidation. In 2026, his wealth is no longer held in simple, vulnerable joint accounts or equity in a primary residence. He has utilized the expertise of the fraternal networks we discussed in Part 9 to restructure his life into a series of protected entities. This is the anthropology of the financial black box. Through the use of irrevocable trusts, family-limited partnerships, and international holdings, men like Thomas are ensuring that their labor is shielded from future litigation. The potential outcomes of this financial engineering are profound. It creates a class of men who are economically productive but legally untouchable. They contribute to the economy through their technical expertise and their consulting roles, but their capital is directed entirely toward the next generation of their own lineage. This is a return to a more ancient form of resource management, where wealth is tied to the bloodline rather than the household. Step by step, this recalibration changes the man's relationship with time and mortality. In his first marriage, Thomas was focused on the immediate needs of the family unit, the mortgage, the vacation, the social approval of the neighbors. As a neo-patriarch, his horizon has shifted to the 100-year view. He is no longer building a home. He is building an institution. He views his role not as a provider of comfort, but as an architect of a multi-generational legacy. This shift in perspective leads to a significant improvement in the biological markers of aging. Because Thomas has a high sense of purpose that is no longer dependent on the volatile emotional state of a partner or the whims of a family court judge, his nervous system has returned to a state of calm, focused energy. He is the ageless mentor. Case studies from 2025 and 2026 show that men who successfully transition into this role report higher levels of life satisfaction than they ever did during their traditional marriages. Furthermore, we must analyze the cultural influence of this new male archetype. In 2026, the American media landscape is being reshaped by the content created by and for these sovereign men. We are seeing a rise in literature, philosophy, and art that centers on the themes of self-reliance, paternal duty, and the reconstruction of the tribe. This is the anthropology of the new canon. Men like Thomas are no longer consuming the mainstream narratives of the United States. They are creating their own. They are building their own media platforms, their own educational systems, and their own rituals of passage. This is a massive shift in the social hierarchy. The divorced man, once the most marginalized and invisible member of the community, is becoming the most influential architect of the new culture. He is the one with the wisdom, the resources, and the tactical experience of having survived the collapse of the old world. The final revelation of this masterclass is that the high-conflict divorce system has acted as a selective pressure. It has filtered out the men who could not adapt and has hardened the men who could. The resulting demographic is a group of males who are uniquely equipped to navigate the instability of the late 2020s. They are the ones who understand how to build in a landscape of ruins. They have lost everything and realize that they are still standing, which gives them a form of psychological power that a man who has never been tested cannot understand. They are the survivors of the American divorce industrial complex, and they are now the leaders of a silent parallel civilization. As we look toward the year 2030, the historical trends suggest that the traditional American family will continue to fragment, but the neo-patriarchal tribes will continue to coalesce. We are moving toward a dual society model. On one side, you have the atomized, state-dependent population living in a cycle of temporary unions and bureaucratic management. On the other, you have the sovereign networks of men who have rebuilt their lineages on a foundation of biological loyalty and financial protection. Thomas is not just a man in a studio apartment anymore. He is the patriarch of a tribe that spans multiple households and jurisdictions. He has won the long game by changing the rules of the game itself. But this final evolution brings with it a new set of challenges that are already appearing on the horizon. As these sovereign men build their parallel institutions, they are beginning to come into direct competition with the state for the hearts and minds of the next generation. The conflict is shifting from the courtroom to the culture at large. What happens when the state realizes it can no longer track the wealth or influence of the men it tried to discard? What happens when the sons of the sovereign men enter the workforce and the voting booths with a completely different understanding of the social contract? While we have reached the end of this specific anthropological deep dive, the story of the Great Recalibration is only beginning. We have mapped the path from the collapse to the reconstruction, but the final impact on the American experiment is still being written in the silent actions of men across the nation. Wait until you see what occurs when these parallel tribes begin to network on a global scale. The next phase of this transformation will not be about survival. It will be about the total redefinition of Western social structures. The sovereign man is no longer alone, and his influence is about to become unavoidable. The deep dive into the male experience has concluded, but the data from the year 2027 is already beginning to leak, and it suggests that the shift we have described is accelerating at a rate that will catch every major American institution off guard. The next series will explore the rise of the parallel state and the final divorce between the productive male and the modern bureaucracy. The journey continues.